The excuse is coming first, and I want to tell you about the excuse. Before I tell you about what the excuse is actually for, because the excuse and the actual reason for the contact are two different things, and understanding the difference between them changes everything about how you receive the contact. When it arrives, in whatever specific and somewhat unlikely form the excuse takes when it presents itself as the reason for the reaching out. The excuse is crazy in the sense of being obviously thin, or obviously constructed, or obviously not quite sufficient as a reason for the contact, in the way that real reasons for contact are sufficient when they are real, rather than when they are the constructed reason for a contact whose actual reason is something more significant than the constructed reason is presenting. Welcome, and let me tell you everything about both the excuse and what the excuse is actually covering. People use excuses to make contact when the real reason for the contact is something they are not yet ready to lead with directly, in the full and exposed form of someone who is reaching out for exactly the reason that they are actually reaching out for, without the protective buffer of the excuse. That reduces the exposure of the actual reaching by providing an alternate official reason for why the contact is happening that is more manageable and less vulnerable than the actual reason would be if it were offered directly without the excuse to hide behind. The excuse allows a test in the specific and important form of someone who is making contact and seeing how the contact is received before deciding whether to move from the excuse to the actual reason. That is the real content of why the contact is happening. In this particular case, at this particular moment, with this particular crazy excuse that is not really about what it appears to be about on the surface of the contact it is producing. Whew. I want to speak about what the test is actually testing, because the test is more specific than the general question of whether the contact is welcomed in the ordinary sense of someone who is checking, whether the person they are contacting is willing to receive the contact at all before investing more in the form of the actual reason that the excuse is providing access to. The specific thing the test is testing is the temperature of the space between you right now, in the real and current form of whatever the space between you currently contains in terms of feeling and energy, and what remains from whatever happened between you in the period that produced the something to apologize for, that the apology is going to address after the excuse has tested the temperature of the space and found it warm enough for the apology and the declaration to be worth making in the specific and vulnerable form that they will take when the test has been passed, in the welcoming reception of the excuse that signals to the person making it that the space is warm enough for what comes next. This means that how you receive the excuse matters for what happens after the excuse in the sequence that leads to the something big going down between the two of you in whatever specific form the going down takes. In your particular situation, receive the excuse warmly, not in the performed and managed form of someone who is performing warmth for the strategic purpose of encouraging the sequence to continue past the excuse and into the apology and declaration that follow, but in the genuine and real form of someone who is glad that the contact is happening in whatever crazy excuse form it has taken, because the contact itself, regardless of the excuse it is using, is the beginning of the sequence that ends with the something big going down in the form that this reading has been describing as the actual content of the contact behind the excuse, and the apology in the approximate form that it is likely to take in your specific situation without the exact form that only your specific life can deliver in the particular and probably somewhat unlikely way that the crazy excuse presents itself when it is the excuse for something more significant than the excuse suggests. The excuse will be something ordinary in the surface sense of something that appears to be a reasonable reason for the contact to happen. When it is assessed without the knowledge that this reading is providing of what is actually producing the contact in the fuller and more significant form of the actual reason that is behind the ordinary excuse, but with the knowledge that this reading is providing, the excuse will look slightly different in the particular way of something that is doing more work than its content justifies as a reason for contact, and whose doing more work than its content justifies is the signal that something more is present behind the excuse than the excuse is showing in its official reason form. When you notice the excuse doing more work than it justifies, that is the moment to know that what this reading is describing has arrived in whatever specific form your life delivers. The crazy excuse that is coming as the covering for the actual content of the contact. Now, the apology, because the title says the contact is just to apologize. And I want to address that just because in the context of this specific situation, is one of the most misleading words available for describing what the apology actually is and what it is actually for in this specific contact. Just to apologize suggests that the apology is the contained and simple purpose of the contact a purpose that begins with the apology and ends with the apology, without the apology being the surface form of something larger. That the apology is the entry point to, rather than the full content of. The apology in this situation is the entry point, not the full content. It is the first step in the specific and progressive movement that the person making contact has planned or hoped in the interior dimension of what they are hoping the contact produces. Between its beginning in the excuse and its destination in what something big going down means. For the two specific people who are involved in the contact, that is approaching, the apology comes first, because what is behind the apology cannot be said or done without the clearing that the apology creates of whatever needs to be cleared between you and the person making contact before that something big can go down in the specific and significant form that this reading is describing as the actual content of the contact behind the excuse and behind the apology, that the excuse is producing as its immediate and official content. Oh, the apology is the clearing move, and what it is clearing is the specific thing that has been between you and this person in the particular and unresolved form of something that was not addressed or not fully addressed in the correct and sufficient form at the time it occurred or that was addressed, but in the insufficient form of something that did not fully land in the complete and felt way that would have cleared it at the time, rather than leaving the residue of the partially cleared thing in the space between you that the apology is now going to address in the full and clearing form that the previous addressing did not. I want to say something honest about the apology itself before I describe what comes after it, because the apology deserves its own honest attention as the specific and significant thing it is, rather than only as the entry point to the something big. That is its context and its purpose. The apology is real. I want to say that directly, because in a reading that describes a crazy excuse and just to apologize and a something big about to go down, the apology could sound like only the tactical thing that someone says to get to what they actually want beyond the apology, in the form of the something big that follows. The apology is not only tactical, it is also real in the specific and genuine form of someone who has actually reflected on what needs to be apologized for and who is arriving with the apology. From the place of having understood something about what they did or did not do, or what they said or did not say, in the period before the contact that produced whatever is between you, that the apology is clearing, the reflection was real. And the understanding that the reflection produced was real. And the apology that the understanding produced is real, even though it is also the entry point to something bigger, real and tactical can coexist, and they do. In the apology that is coming for the specific person reading this, in the specific situation that produced the something to apologize for, that the crazy excuse is providing access to. Now, the something big that is about to go down, because this is the part that the title is building toward, and that makes the excuse crazy rather than only thin, and that makes the apology the entry point rather than only the apology. The something big is a declaration in the specific and direct form of someone who is going to say what they actually want and what they are hoping the contact produces between its beginning and the excuse and its arrival in the declaration. That is the real content of the crazy excuse and the real destination of the apology that clears the way for the declaration to be made in the cleared space that the apology produces. Whew. The declaration is about you and what this person wants in relation to you in the specific and significant form of someone who has decided that what they want is worth the crazy excuse and the real apology. And the vulnerable declaration that will follow both of them when the clearing has been sufficient and the declared space is available for the declaration that this person has been preparing in the interior and invisible form of someone who knows what they want to say and is finding the way to say it through the excuse and the apology that precede it in the specific and progressive form of someone who has a plan that begins with the crazy excuse and ends with the declaration. That is the actual content of the plan. I want to describe what the declaration will feel like when it arrives in the specific and sensory form of what it produces in the person receiving it. Because I think the preparation for the feeling is as important as the preparation for the content, and the feeling is something that this reading can prepare you for in the approximate and energy-based form that this kind of reading produces. The declaration will feel like the specific form of relief that arrives when something that has been unnamed between two people is finally named in the direct and clear form of someone saying what they mean without the cushioning language that people sometimes use to soften what they are saying to the point where what they are saying becomes unclear in the softened form that was designed to be comfortable rather than clear. This declaration will be clear in the specific and relief producing form of something that was unnamed becoming named at last. After the sequence of the excuse and the apology has cleared the space for the naming to happen in the direct and clear form that the cleared space allows, and that the uncleared space did not allow for the full period of whatever was between you. in the uncleared and still being apologized for form. That the crazy excuse is now starting to address. In the declaration that is coming is you in the specific and declared form of someone who is saying, I want this connection to be different from what it has been, in whatever form the different is. For these two specific people in their specific situation, that has produced both the something to apologize for and the crazy excuse to make contact, and the declaration that is the real destination of the whole sequence, from the excuse to the apology to the declaration. That makes something big go down between two people who have something between them that has not yet been fully named or declared or claimed in the complete and direct form that the declaration is about to provide. Now what to do when the crazy excuse arrives and the sequence begins. In whatever specific form your life delivers it, receive the excuse in the knowing form of someone who understands what it is and what it is for, rather than in the dismissive form of someone who sees only the thinness of the excuse and responds to the thinness rather than to what the thinness is covering in the form of the actual content that the contact is carrying behind the excuse that is making the contact possible for the person who needed the excuse to make the contact in the form it is taking. Receive the excuse generously as the necessary thing it is for someone who had something to apologize for and something bigger to declare and who needed the excuse as the way in. That did not require the full exposure of the declaration from the very first moment of contact, without the clearance the apology provides, and without the test the excuse allows of whether the contact is welcomed before the declaration commits to the full exposure of what is actually being declared, and receive the apology in the real form it is, as the genuine clearing move of someone who has reflected and understood and is clearing the space for the declaration that follows in the real and clearing form rather than only the tactical form that would dismiss it as only the strategic precursor to what the person actually wants. It is both, and receiving it as both is the most accurate and most generous reception available to the specific person who is reading this message before the crazy excuse arrives and the something big goes down in whatever specific and real form your specific life is about to deliver it in. I want to say one more thing about the something big going down, specifically because I want to give it its proper weight. Before I close this message and leave you with the knowing of what is on its way, in the crazy excuse and the real apology, and the declaration that follows both, something big going down between two people, in the context of a declaration, is not a crisis or a conflict or a confrontation in the difficult and demanding form that those words sometimes carry when they are associated with things going down between people who have something unresolved between them, something big going down. In this context is the specific and significant form of something that has been unnamed between two people being finally named in the direct and clear and declared form that makes the unnamed thing into something real and present in the visible space between the two people where it can be responded to and worked with and built on in the specific and forward moving form of two people who have finally named what has been between them and who can now move together from the named place rather than the unnamed one that the crazy excuse was always going to turn into when it completed its sequence through the apology and the declaration to the something big that has finally been named and made real. In the visible space between you, that is the something big, and it is worth the crazy excuse that is bringing it in whatever specific and somewhat unlikely form. The excuse takes when it arrives on the way to the something big that was always behind it, behind the crazy excuse, and the real apology that preceded. Be ready in the knowing and generous form of someone who knows what is coming and who can receive it fully because they understood the sequence before it began in the specific and near form of the crazy excuse that is already in motion toward the something big that is its actual destination.